Of all the Primarchs, save perhaps Mortarion, Lion L. Johnson stands apart. Partially this is due to his taciturn nature. A brooding silence hangs over him at all times. Yet, there is something more, something buried beneath his noble exterior. Perhaps this is a result of his upbringing, growing to maturity alone in the monster-ridden forests of Caliban. Even at a council of war, the lion moves like an apex predator. He is always watching, always planning, always hunting. He unnerves even his brothers. Lion L. Johnson. The Lion. The First. He is the first of the Primarchs, and all after him were forged on his template. The story of the Lion is one wrought with endless struggles, mistakes that will never leave him, and few people he can truly call friend. The life of a Primarch is one of ever-persisting challenges that no mortal man can ever hope to overcome, yet, as a son of the Emperor, he must. Primarch of the First Legion, father to the Dark Angels, and son to the Emperor of mankind, and above all else, the Lion is loyal. Let us begin. Due to some questionable mothering decisions from Erda, mainly the desire to protect her sons from the future war and suffering the Emperor intended for them, she believed it best to open a war portal inside the lab containing their gestation pods, and have them scattered across the galaxy. A galaxy at the time well known to be overflowing with Xenos races hell-bent on the death and destruction of all other races, death worlds teeming with monsters beyond human comprehension, and anything else out there that might extinguish a human life without so much as a passing thought of fancy. Obviously, much safer than staying at home with Daddy and all his lovely Xenos-killing toys. Caliban was one such death world. A feudal planet that surface comprised largely of immense forests, home to monstrous beasts touched by the corruption of chaos, mutated beyond recognition, ever on the hunt, ever hungry, and able to rend a seasoned power armor-wearing warrior limb from limb with the ease of an apex predator born of such a world. It was this world that Lion L. Johnson's gestation pod landed, and so birthed the young Primarch onto a world no child should ever have to witness. But the Lion was no ordinary child. Gifted with demigod-like strength and intellect, the young Primarch faced his first challenge: survival. It is unknown how long he spent in the wilderness away from civilization, though before his discovery by the planet's human inhabitants, rumors of a man-like spirit that dwelled in those dark, foreboding forests, living amongst the horrors, leaving his own impression upon the world, out of sight, learning, waiting. Rumors that continued a good century before his discovery. When the Lion finally emerged, it was to the discovery of a group of techno-medieval knights, simply known as the Order. Among their ranks were those from all backgrounds, peasant or noble. All were equal to join the Order, something that other knightly orders did not emulate, preferring to strictly fill their ranks from only noble families. These knights wielded ancient technology from the Age of Strife, weapons and power armor handed down from knight to knight, relics of the past. They rode on horseback from their enormous fortress monasteries, the only safe havens from the great beasts of the vast forests, and fought said beasts not knowing should they live to see a new day. Whether the young Primarch had spent decades or centuries in those forests was unclear, though one thing was clear: the Lion emerged from that forest a hunter. Dangerous beyond all reason, patient, calculating and deadly, he had not only survived, but thrived in that world, and became all the more capable for it. The knights feared this mysterious man, surrounded by so much uncertainty while evidently more capable than any before them. They deemed him too dangerous to allow life, no more deadly to them than one of the great beasts themselves. One man judged he be spared, one of the Order's famed champions of Old Night, Luther. My first impression was a mane of long yellow hair. I thought again of a lion. though the creature seemed more upright than any feline. I saw claws, long and bloodied. The others closed with pistols raised and ready, their chainswords growling. The creature snarled in reply, and in doing so the hair fell back from his face, and I looked upon the visage of a man. Eyes the colour of Caliban's forest regarded me from amid a grime-covered countenance, alert and full of intelligence. "Hold!" I cried, sharper and swifter than any command I had given before. I could scarce believe what I witnessed and dismounted to see better. As far as I could judge, the person was a little taller than myself, but, other than the outstanding mane, was bereft of hair, like an adolescent. I could tell, for he was fully naked, body as dirty as his face, the splash of fresh blood down his chest and along his arms from hands to elbow. Swallowing hard, I remembered that this person, if it was indeed a person, had attacked and slain the great beast we had found. It seemed impossible. It was Luther who gave to the young Primarch his name, Lion L. Johnson. In the Calibanite dialect of Low Gothic, this meant the Lion, son of the forest. Luther ingrained into Johnson the ways of Caliban and the Order, teaching him the laws of the world, instilling reason and justice into his actions, giving to him a higher purpose, one not just of survival. Though a quiet and solemn figure, the Lion learned to speak, master politics and the culture of Caliban and their knight orders with ease. With aid from his friend and mentor Luther, the Lion quickly rose up among the ranks of the Order, proving not only himself as a warrior without equal, but a tactician and leader beyond that of his peers. It was in this moment that Johnson announced his plans for a great crusade against the great beast that dominated Caliban. The crusade was received with enthusiastic vigour among the Knights of the Order, of which this enthusiasm extended out into the other knightly orders of the planet, giving new life to this death world, and passing on the lesson Johnson learned from Luther, to fight for something more than just survival. New recruits flocked to the leadership and example of the Lion, and though many were inspired and ready to put an end to the horrors that forced them to hide in their fortress monasteries, there were some who resisted this change. Many of the knightly orders believed that were the Lion to succeed in his efforts to free the planet from the fear of the great beast, that society as it was would then cease to exist, and a new world order would replace the one they stood on top of. Lionel Johnson was merciless in his response. Traitors to his cause and the salvation of Caliban were put down with ruthless efficiency. Eventually, before long, the other knightly orders fell into line, and the Grand Crusade against the great beast would soon be complete. The Lion's drive and passion for the crusade never wavered, despite those around him slowly being worn down by the many years. Johnson was relentless in his obsession. Fire, steel, poison, and perseverance eroded the numbers of the great beast down to the point that the knights were able to take the fight further into the forest than they had ever gone, delving deep into the nests of the monsters, once and for all ridding the planet of the fear and horror that had once enveloped it. In the end, Johnson carried the day. His supporters argued that the people of Caliban had skulked for too long behind the walls of their settlement. They had lived too much in fear of the beasts. Man was made to have dominion over the wilderness, they said, not vice versa. It was time to restore the world to balance, to end the reign of the beasts and give mankind dominion over the forests. "This is our world," he said. "It is not the world of the beasts. It is time we took our stand." So, the decision was made, and Johnson would have his campaign. One by one, the beasts were hunted down and killed. They were driven from the forests. They were tracked to their lairs and destroyed. In one thing at least, though, some of those who had opposed Johnson were proven right, for it took more than 6 years to finish the campaign. It took 10 years of constant campaigning, 10 years of hardship, 10 years of friends maimed and lost, but ultimately, it was worth it. Our cause was just, and we achieved our ambitions. 10 years, and not one of the great beasts remained. With his Grand Crusade complete, and the people of Caliban finally free from the Terror, Lion Johnson was granted the title Grand Master of the Order. His strength and unwavering dedication to the cause had inspired all who followed, for the Lion was a leader who did not just order his warriors to risk their lives for him and the cause, but he strode forward at the very tip of the spear itself, an example that left his followers in both awe and fear. For his presence was not just one of strength, leadership, intellect and perseverance, but also one of emotionless brutality, ruthlessness and mercilessness. Unfortunately, the Lion's rapid ascension to planetary fame and power was not well received by his brother and mentor, Luther. A jealous flame had been fanned within Luther, one that would later take hold and lead to disaster for Johnson and the Imperium they were about to encounter.
In any other era, Luther probably would have been acclaimed as the greatest hero of his age. He was a tireless champion of the people of Caliban, marked out as much by his inner qualities of humour and cool thoughtfulness in times of crisis as he was by the valour of his deed. It had been Luther's tragedy to be born in the same era as a man against whom all his endeavours would be judged and forever found wanting in comparison. For the day he had encountered Johnson in the forest and decided to bring him to civilization, Luther had sounded the death knell of his own legend.
Unknown to the Lion, his father, the Emperor of Mankind, began his own Great Crusade, one that Johnson had been specifically tailor-made for, and that the Emperor had been actively seeking him out to lead his First Legion. After reports of a man beyond mortals leading the death world of Caliban reached the Emperor's ear on Terror, he put together 500 veterans of the First Legion and set out to greet his lost son, and to bring him back home to Terror at his rightful place as Primarch of the First Legion. The Emperor's arrival would soon become a thing of legend on Caliban. His enormous ships descended from high, and from it were born the First Legion. 500 jet-black armoured super soldiers marched from the great machine. The darkness of their armour, a coincidental reflection of ancient Calibanite legend of dark angels, now seemingly a reality brought down from the heavens themselves. Then, amid the noise and confusion, he saw shapes resolving from the howling winds and noise. Dark shapes, armoured and descending on wings of fire. Beside him, Luther shielded his eyes and said, "And the angels of darkness descended on pinions of fire and light. The great and terrible Dark Angel." And so the First Legion's namesake had been uttered upon their arrival. Dark Angels. Lion Johnson would later come face to face with his father not long after the Dark Angels had arrived. Without so much as a wasted breath, the Lion would swear fealty to his father, for he sensed their connection immediately, and Johnson was not one to second-guess his instincts. Upon first meeting his sons, the Lion sought to test these new warriors in single combat, choosing to personally duel the captain of the company. Both fully equipped, the Lion left his son wounded and defeated, while he himself remained untouched. Lion Johnson weighed the value of these Astartes and found them worthy of the name Dark Angels. It wouldn't be long before the now peaceful forests of Caliban were flattened and cleared in order to make room for the Imperium's machines of industrialization, transforming this once lush green forested world into a hub of belching thick emissions and the sound of military might. And so, recruitment from this newly compliant world began. The Astartes brought to the world by the Emperor got to work putting potential aspirants to trial that would test their strengths both physically and mentally, determining whether they are worthy of character to move on to the next stage. The Knights of the Order rumoured amongst themselves that these trials were to see their worth as to gauge ascension to that of Astartes, and thus, with the motivation to become one of the Emperor's angels, they threw themselves wholeheartedly into the tests. Though they were right, the trials had another reason, and that was to determine if the humans of Caliban were genetically pure enough to use this as a recruitment world for the First Legion. The knightly orders of Caliban took much pride in their differences, and often came into conflict with one another due to this. using combat to settle these disputes. This way of thinking was to immediately be stamped out if the Imperium were to recruit from this world, as Astartes are to be unified and of one mind, driven by the Emperor's will, with all glory for the Emperor rather than for individual self. The Lion then decided that the knightly orders were to be dissolved and integrated into the First Legion. Though not all would have the honour of being given the Emperor's gifts and become his angels, they would still have the opportunity to join the Imperial Guard. After a handful of years, when the small medieval towns and villages had transformed into ever-climbing city metropolises, when the planet's resources were in full flow into the mouth of the Imperial military might, and the people of the world ready to serve the master of mankind, it was at this point the lucky few aspirants to pass the trials finally began their evolution to that of the Emperor's angels, and the Lion's Dark Angels. "We are the First Legion," said the Lion, "the honoured, the sons of the Lion, and we will not be marching into war without a name that strikes terror into the hearts of our enemies. As our legends spoke of the great heroes who held back the monsters of our distant past, so too shall we hold back the enemies of the Imperium as we set off into the great void to fight in the name of the Emperor. We shall be the Dark Angels." Unfortunately, though Luther and many others were among the selected to join the First Legion, they were too old to undergo the implementations and benefits of the gene seed. In place of this, Luther and the others underwent extensive genetic, surgical, and biochemical enhancements in order to push themselves into the superhuman levels, vastly increasing their strength, power, speed, reflexes, and much more, even growing in height and size. For all of these gifts, they were still not true Astartes. This shortcoming weighed heavily on them, especially Luther himself, watching those formerly their students become significantly more powerful than them. This didn't stop Luther from remaining the right-hand man of the Lion, nor did it discredit his proven devotion and contributions to the Imperium. But the thought of being seen as lesser than his peers was enough to keep that flame of jealousy burning within him. With the original 500 Astartes that had arrived on Caliban, as well as other chapters of the First Legion that had sought him out from across the galaxy, Imperial Guard recruited from Caliban, and Mechanicum Magi from Forge World Xanadu, at 20,000 strong, the Lion was ready. With the First Legion now to embark on the Emperor's Grand Crusade, Lionel Johnson took his force out into the galaxy with a single goal in mind: enact the Emperor's will. With help from the Mechanicum of Xanadu, the Lion sought out the remainder of his legion that still fought on blood-soaked planets for the Emperor, and brought them under his command. When the First Legion had learned of their Primarch's discovery, most felt shame at the prospect of him arriving to them on a world not already in compliance. Those still fighting on worlds redoubled their efforts, desperate to greet their father with victory and honour. With each part of the First Legion brought into the fold, the Lion would personally test the newfound battle companies before they were welcomed into the Dark Angels. A man of few words, the Lion preferred to have his actions speak for him, encouraging any who might doubt him a chance to best their new commander in honest combat. Within a few years, Lionel Johnson had brought together the majority of his legion, almost 100,000 warriors, and brought them to the First Legion's stronghold on Grimari. It was here he was to fight against Pius Gallagher, the master of the Host of Fire. An hour-long legendary duel unfolded, and when the Ring of Steel no longer filled the air, Lionel Johnson, before the First Legion's Council of Masters, was granted the title of Grand Master of the First Legion, becoming the first warrior to consolidate the entire leadership of the now fully formed Dark Angels. Recorded in the ancient books of the Council of Masters, the Lion swore his oath in solidarity with his sons. "We are the Angels of Darkness. For us there is no peace, no end but war and death. We shall not walk in the golden halls of mankind's future, but stand resolute in the shadows beyond. While we yet draw breath, this Imperium will not fall and we will not know defeat. For I pledge every warrior, every drop of blood in the Legion in the name of victory, no matter the cost. The Lion made significant changes to how the First Legion would function, tearing down old hierarchies and instilling his own, placing those in positions of master due to their merit rather than origin or time spent in service. Though many welcomed these changes, some felt that abandoning the old traditions of the First Legion is disrespectful to their origins and deeds over the many years since their forming. With the entirety of the First Legion now under his command, the Lion set his and his son's sights on the fortress world of Karkasarn. It was by no coincidence that the Lion chose this world as his first battle since consolidating the forces of the Dark Angels under his leadership. For this world had previously seen the blood of its legions shed upon its soil while under the command of their second Grand Master, Urian Vendrake, who had made a reckless assault on the enemy's defences while aiding the Ultramarines and their Primarch Robute Guilliman, leading to Urian's and many First Legion Marines to their death. Though they had won the day, Guilliman had chastised the First Legion survivors for their attempts at reckless glory and wasted lives at cost. Karkasarn had since fallen into rebellion, unleashing biogenic phage onto the world's surface, forever transforming the broken and defeated populace into bloody, twisted hordes of monsters that only sought to consume all they could get their ghoulish claws and fangs into. The Ultramarines left behind to oversee this world were quickly overwhelmed by this unexpected enemy. With their garrisons overrun and their numbers dwindling, Praetor Arteion had a distress call sent out into the cosmos for aid. So when he saw the Invincible Reason enter real space in the skies above them, with bay doors open already and initiating drop pods, his legendary stoic demeanour quickly lifted into that of relief. He is said to have cried out in joy at the glorious sight of it. True to his character, Lionel Johnson led the assault on the gruesome abominations that assailed the sons of his brother, and with 10,000 Dark Angels at his back, he and his sons made quick work of the mutants, leaving a trail of bloody corpses and mangled bodies in his wake. The rebellion of Karkasarn was annihilated much like any who would stand before his predator-like gaze.
The Lion himself was at the forefront of the relief force, cutting a path through the teeming hordes of fleshgoer that threatened to overrun the Ultramarines. At the head of 1,000 ebon-armored veterans of the Dreadwing, the new master of the First Legion made swift work at the foe. A curtain of superheated plasma scouring clean the walls and bunkers of the Ultramarines' fortress. At his heel came the full force of the fleet, 10,000 transhuman warriors of Dark Angels, and by their blade was the enemy put to rout and then annihilated as they cowered in their bolt holes.
When the Ultramarines stepped out from their defences and greeted their saviours, they half expected the father of the First Legion to lay claim to this now reconquered planet. Yet, as quickly as they came, the First Legion moved on to their next hunt. For the Lion had no interest in fanfare or revelry, no desire for the games of politics, governing, or monuments. All that was left behind was an empty banner, marking a debt paid to the Ultramarines, and a message for all to hear. The Lion was here for one reason, and one reason only: for the Emperor. One of Lionel Johnson's first campaigns in the Great Crusade was that of the Compliance of Molech. Alongside the Emperor himself, his brothers Horus, Fulgrim and Jakatai, as well as their respective legions. When they came in contact with the planet, there was no resistance, for the people of Molech welcomed the Imperium with open arms, long awaiting their return to Terran rule. Though compliance was the goal, there was also a task that ran parallel to this. For the Emperor had taken his sons down into the belly of the world before the very warp gate that he had entered long before during the Dark Age of technology. Though the truth of this is unknown, as after over 100 days of ordering the planet they left, but not before the Emperor psychically erased the minds of his sons and any who had accompanied them to the gate. Why he had done this raises questions, though that is for another time. Before departing, they left behind nearly 100 Imperial Guard regiments, 3 Legio Titanicus cohorts, and 2 Space Marine Legion detachments. The Rangdan Xenocides would be one of the most devastating campaigns fought by the First Legion. The Rangdan were incredibly advanced Xeno races that brought war to the northern parts of the Imperium. With numbers not thought possible and soldiers that could go toe-to-toe with Astartes, they were the greatest threat to the Imperium ever to be seen. For almost a decade, the forces of the First Legion held the Rangdan at bay. The legend of the Lion grew during this time. Not an inspiring charismatic leader like his brothers Horus or Sanguinius, nor the feral rampaging berserkers as Russ or Angron were, but as a silent, determined predator seeking out the strongest foes, his will unbreakable, his purpose clear, and eyes set purely on task at hand. Many would follow the Lion in his hunt, if only to bear witness to the skill and mastery of the Emperor's first son. By the end of the Rangdan Xenocide, the Dark Angels had been reduced to 1/10 of their number, the largest loss the First Legion had ever suffered, and hopefully ever will. 9 legions had taken part in the fighting, with rumours that the missing 2nd and 11th Legion had been present. At some point during all of this, the unknown 20th Legion showed up, with an Astartes leading them, claiming the name of Alfarius, offering aid to the Lion, saying it was Johnson who deserved and should be War Master. This was before Alfarius had been discovered, though rumours of his ghost-like legion had been heard, and before the title of War Master had been made known, though rumours also existed that such a time would come when one of the Primarchs would be left in command overall. Much of the Rangdan remain a mystery. Even their supposed capital world of Avec Moors is speculated to be misinformation, leading many to believe that the Rangdan may one day return. And if that day were to come, the Imperium as it stands is not ready. The Battle of Dulan and the infamous feud that took place there has been remembered and told by the Dark Angels and Space Wolves for 10,000 years. Both Lionel Johnson and Leman Russ had been sent to the world of Dulan, and though the two legions had fought side by side many times, and both respected the other as warriors and brothers, they eventually came to blows. The planetary governor of Dulan, Duraf, had denounced Leman Russ as the Emperor's lapdog, and swore to feed Russ's heart to his pet Grox. Russ, not taking this insult well, swore in return to kill Duraf personally and demanded to lead the offense. The Lion had already made plans for his assault and in doing so forced Russ to remain back. Once the battle was over and Governor Duraf dead at the hands of Johnson, Russ stormed into the fortress and struck the Lion across the room. This leading to an all-out brawl between the two demigod-like Primarchs lasting a full day and night. Though evenly matched, it was said that Russ was slightly stronger and the Lion was slightly faster. Eventually Russ would realise how foolish he was to have his anger cloud his judgment and began laughing, putting a stop to the fight. The Lion, however, still angry at being blindsided by Russ, struck him with one final blow, knocking the Space Wolf Primarch clean out. By the time Russ had regained consciousness, Lionel Johnson was long gone. This has led to a rumoured tradition of the Dark Angels and Space Wolves participating in one-on-one duels anytime they meet, as a sign of tribute and honour between the two legions. While Jagatai Khan and Lionel Johnson may be different in many ways, they both share a sense of forthrightness about them, preferring to get straight to the point rather than play politics. Due to this shared nature, the Primarchs of the White Scars and the Dark Angels were closer in brotherhood to each other than they were to their other brothers. So when Jagatai called for aid in bringing the world of the Sarosi into compliance after a year of stalled attempts, the Lion obliged. While the world of Sarosh claimed enthusiasm in joining with the Imperium and shared the same secular beliefs, they were in fact secret worshippers of chaos, and truly viewed their would-be friends as unsuppressed evil. Once the Lion arrived and invited the leader of the Sarosi aboard his ship, Invincible Reason, to further discuss compliance, things took a turn for the worse when the Lord High Exalter brazenly denounced the Imperium and the Emperor to the Lion's face. Johnson, without hesitation, promptly ended the delusional leader's life with a power sword through the body. "You go too far," said the Lion, his hand going to the ceremonial sword at his side. "No, you do," responded the High Exalter. "You are an abomination, all of you," he snarled, his fat jowls wobbling. "The only reason I bear your presence is because I have been granted the honor of pronouncing the judgment of my people upon you. Your Imperium is the work of evil men," said the Lord High Exalter. "Your words are falsehoods. You are craven and dishonorable, and your angels are the worst, the product of rotting beasts. You are liar angels. You are loathsome and unclean. Enough! Roared the lion. The commander of the Dark Angels was enraged. His hand gripped the pommel of his sword so tightly that his knuckles were white. By the Emperor! I spit on your Emperor, said the fat man, and the Davin Imperials gave a collective intake of breath. And I spit on you, Lionel Johnson. The High Exalter stretched his arms out, laid 3 fingers from his right hand on the top of 5 fingers of his left hand and touched them to the symbol painted on his forehead. You are not men, nor worthy leaders. You are. He was not allowed to finish that sentence. Before the High Lord Exalter could say another word, the lion drew his gleaming sword and clove through the fat man's shoulder and down into his ample gut. Though what should have been the end of the matter was really only the beginning. The Serosi delegation had somehow managed to smuggle on board a nuclear warhead in an attempt to assassinate the lion. Before any major damage could be done, Luther, the lion's friend and mentor, and a librarian named Zahariel Alzurius were able to eject the shuttle containing the nuke out of the ship. Though still detonating, the damage to the flagship was minimal. It was here that Luther revealed his growing jealousy of Lionel Johnson to Zahariel, a jealousy that had been steadily growing over the years since Johnson had risen to power above his mentor, telling Zahariel that he had discovered the nuke earlier, that allowed it to remain on board, briefly taking to heart the idea of allowing it to kill his friend and now commander. It's a weapon of some sort, said a voice behind him. An atomic warhead, I think. Zahariel spun, his fist raised to strike the speaker. Luther stood before him, his face a mask of anguish and regret. An atomic warhead? Asked Zahariel. Yes, said Luther, coming closer and peering into the open access panel. I think the whole shuttle is nothing but one giant missile. You knew of this, said Zahariel. Why didn't you say anything? Luther turned away from him, his shoulders slumped as though in defeat. He turned back to Zahariel, who was shocked to see tears in his commander's eyes. I almost did, Zahariel, said Luther. I wanted to, but then I thought of what would be mine if I didn't. The Legion, Command, Caliban. It would all be mine, and I would no longer have to share it with someone whose shadow obscures everything I do. The Lion, said Zahariel. His deeds are great, but so are yours. Maybe in another age, said Luther. One in which I did not share the same span of time as a man like the Lion. In any other age, the glory of leading Caliban from the darkness would have been mine, but instead it goes to my brother. You have no idea how galling it is to be the greatest man of an age and have that taken from you in an instant. Zahariel watched the words flow from Luther in a flood. For a decade and more, these feelings had been contained within a dam of honor and restraint, but the dam was crumbling, and Luther's true feelings were spilling out. I never realized, said Zahariel, his hand sliding towards his sword. No one did. No, even I did not. Not fully, said Luther. Not until I saw this shuttle. I wouldn't have to lift a finger. All I'd have to do is walk away, and everything I wanted would be mine. Then why are you back here? I ordered everyone out of the embarkation deck and walked away, said Luther, one hand covering his eyes as he spoke. But I hadn't gone more than a few steps before I knew I couldn't do it. Then you're here to stop it, said Zahariel, relieved beyond words. I am, nodded Luther. So, you can stop reaching for your blade. I realized that it was an honor to serve a warrior as great as the Lion, and that I was the luckiest man alive to be allowed to call him brother. With all notions of diplomacy out the window, so to speak, the Sasori were quickly brought down by the First Legion, a personal vendetta to those who would attempt such a cowardly act, one not received well by a legion whose traditions are grounded in codes of honor and combat. In a rare case of mercy from the Lion, Luther was sent back to Caliban to act as a guardian of their old homeworld, and to oversee the recruitment and training of future Dark Angels. Though the punishment was light, it was still a great insult to be pulled away from the Emperor's Great Crusade. Along with Luther, Johnson sent Zahariel and 500 Dark Angels to assist him. Though this mistake was unknown to him at the time, this would prove to be one that would haunt him till this day. As the Great Crusade continued, the Lion began to withdraw from the embrace of his brothers. In his mind, there was no time to be wasted on such gatherings of celebration or acts of rivalry. His mind was set to task, moving battle to battle, testing himself and his legion against the great foes of the Imperium, forever seeking to solidify mankind's place in the galaxy as the one true rulers. As this distance grew between Johnson and his brothers, so did memory fade of the First Legion's deeds and glory, fading into obscurity. With the exception of one, Horus Lupercal. When Horus was named War Master of the Crusade after the conquest of Ulanor Prime, the Lion was not present. Horus believed that were he there, he may have lost the honor to the first son of the Emperor, for he knew that though his brother was not well liked by the others, they did respect him a great deal, while his father, the Emperor, trusted Johnson not only in word, but backed it up by allowing the First Legion access to the secret ancient arsenals of Terror. An arsenal that the Lion would use against the Khrave. The Khrave were a race of massively psychic-powered Xenos that could control the minds of other races, allowing them to influence civilizations on a planetary and even galactic scale. As they had pushed onward into the Imperium, the Lion would seek them out. The Khrave were led and ruled by the Autochthona, an ancient progenitor of their race. A being so ancient it had seen the rise and fall of the Eldar, had existed during the war in heaven, and had laid in wait for the galaxy to ripen, ready to feast. As they expanded their conquest and increased the might of their psychic network, they grew strong enough and bold enough to make themselves known. Responding to this threat, Johnson would bring the full might of the Dark Angels down upon them, eventually leading to a head-to-head confrontation between the two leaders. It was here that the Lion would reveal one of the First Legion's biggest trump cards. Stenia strode into the central nexus. The Knight of the Iron Wing had been outfitted with a psychically baffled helmet of Santel's order, and was flanked by a pair of towering six-limbed cyber-autonoma. Adamantium-clad behemoths of inhuman aspect and devilish asymmetry, these things advanced ahead of the legionary as though directly from the techno-horrifying imaginings of old Night. No blundering autonoma with these. No cybernetically preserved cadavers spared the final kiss of death. They were Exindios, the last of the dreaded Silica Animus, the bastard offspring of the Men of Iron. Tortured, neutered, once limitless intellects, they were now chained to a single armored core in the service of the Emperor of mankind. Legends of such terrors lived on in the species' memory of old Night and the wars of unification. The continued existence of such artificial terrors, even in their current mutilated capacity, was a secret kept even from the Primarchs and the Adepts of Mars. One known only to the Emperor, the Lion, and the most exalted ranks of the First Legion's Iron Wing. The Lion sensed the ripple in the ether as the Khrave or Kothana unfurled its mind towards them, only to have its thoughts rebuffed by logic processes of copper, silicon, and steel.
"You cannot fight what you cannot see,"
said the Lion, launching himself at the wizened Xenos as the two Ascendio Autonoma deployed their weapons. With the advantage now his, the Lion would continue his fight against the Autochthona. However, the tables would not truly turn if not for the selfless loyalty and sacrifice of the Dark Angel Captain Duriel and his men, who detonated a nuclear weapon destroying a Khrave Titan, causing such a devastating psychic backlash across the ranks of the Khrave that it crippled their forces and even laid the Autochthona down low, and Johnson would finish the job.
"It is possible that the Imperium of my father will one day falter as you insist it must,"
said the Lion, breathing hard from his exertions. He reversed his sword to wield it point down over the spasming body of the Khrave. The Quillian raised to his eyes.
"As I still draw breath it shall not, and you shall never know."
Lionel Johnson drove his sword through the Autochthonar's skull.
"Because you sought to pit your strength against the valor of the Dark Angels."
Now War Master, Horus was troubled by the Lion's reputation and the trust his father showed him, for when he fell to chaos and turned on his father, the Lion was the only brother he knew without a doubt he could not bring to his side. Lionel Johnson, above all else, was loyal. And so Horus did the only thing he could. He sent the Dark Angels far away to the edge of the Imperium, removing him from the picture, too far away and too ingrained in battle to respond in time to his great betrayal. It would only be a handful of years later that the events of Isstvan III would take place, and word of it would reach the Lion, who was engaged in a drawn-out compliance campaign against the human Xenos Confederation known as the Gordian League. When Johnson realized what Horus had done by sending him so far away from Terra, he quickly changed his plans. Taking a small strike force of Dark Angels away from the Gordian campaign, he left the remainder of his sons to finish the task. The Lion knew that were he to take his entire force, Horus would find a way to delay his efforts to come to the Imperium's aid. So, with this small detachment of his sons, they made their way to the Forge World of Diamat, which would have been a substantial resource to the traitor legions. His goal was twofold: to deprive Horus the immense power of the Ordanti siege weapons, and to gain them for the Loyalists. Johnson's forces were able to make it to Diamat undetected, and now in place were a very real deterrent to Horus's invading fleet, who withdrew shortly after, not willing to risk a confrontation with the Dark Angels. The Iron Warriors, along with their Primarch Perturabo, arrived at Diamat not long after, and when meeting with the Lion aboard his ship, he inquired as to how Johnson came to know of these siege engines. Johnson explained he had learned of the war machines some 50 years earlier in the Great Crusade, when Horus had commissioned them for a heavy siege campaign on the world of Tethanos, though the siege was long over by the time they had been completed. He went on to outline how he knew Horus's treachery would eventually lead to terror itself, as the only true end to his goal would be the death of their father. Johnson then told Perturabo that he was to return to the shield worlds of the Gordian League, and amass his legion's forces for return to Terra. Gifting his brother the Ordinanti siege weapons before he left, he also imparted to Perturabo his thoughts of jealousy towards Horus, believing that had he been the first of his father's sons to be discovered, he would have been granted the honor of War Master, and once the war was over, the Emperor would have to choose a new War Master in Horus's place, and ask Perturabo for his support. Johnson leaned forward in his chair.
"Well, naturally," he said. His expression grew serious. "I don't do this for accolades, brother, nor for the power. Not really. I do this for the good of the Imperium. Horus became our father's favorite son for no other reason than fate. Had I been the first one he found, I would be War Master today. No offense."
The Primarch smiled.
"None taken. So, I can count on your support when the time comes. I feel that the Emperor will need to choose a new War Master very quickly if the Great Crusade is to continue." "That goes without saying,"
the Primarch agreed. Little did the Lion know that Perturabo had already sworn loyalty to Horus, and by gifting him the siege engines, he had inadvertently doomed the Loyalist legions who were to fight on Isstvan V. Months later, after the devastation of the Dropside massacre on Isstvan V, Konrad Curze, Primarch of the Night Lords, would launch a campaign known as the Thramas Crusade, assaulting the Loyalist Mechanicum Forge worlds in the Thramas system. During this time, Curze would leave a deep void beacon in the path of Johnson's fleet, transmitting coordinates to the planet of Sasualska, where they could parley. In truth, Konrad sought only to try and break his brother, a task many would rightfully claim impossible. Both brother Primarchs would descend to the planet with an escort of 2 of their honor guards each, and though the meeting began with civility, this changed quickly when Curze gave insult to the Lion, resulting in Johnson striking his former brother.
All those present had expected the meeting to end in violence, that it would see the 2 Primarchs cross blades and draw their legions into the fight, but only Curze had expected that it would be the Lion who would strike first. With the Lion's sudden fury, the battle was begun, and once it started, it quickly spread. At first, the 2 Primarchs struggled alone, then their honor guard drew blood, and within the space of a few short minutes, drop pods and attack ships rained down upon the planet as full-scale conflict erupted. This would be no ordered and composed battle. No carefully planned engagement with objectives and strategies, but a sprawling brawl. A mindless melee powered by blind hatred and fury where neither side made any attempt at formations or battle lines, but simply charged forward to grapple and blast at the foe at point-blank rage. At its heart, the two Primarchs fought until they were awash in each other's blood, both screaming and cursing and exchanging blows with equal viciousness, their differences masked with the gore and the rage that twisted their features. The only cause or objective on Tuchulcha was death, and the fighting did not relent, continuing long past the exhaustion of munitions and long past any rational casualty level.
With Konrad Curze almost strangling the life out of the Lion, one of the Dark Angel honor guards drove his sword into the back of Curze, saving his Primarch's life. Both legions would come to the aid of their respective Primarchs, dragging them each back to safety. A year later, the Lion received an astropathic message with information regarding traitor movements in the Perditus system. Arriving to find the 98th Company of the Iron Hands led by Cassilair Loromech in battle with a Death Guard company led by Callus Tython. The conflict was being fought over the possession of an ancient sentient device known as the Tuchulcha engine, which was capable of precise and efficient warp jumps, a tool the Lion decided he would take for himself. When the Primarch of the First Legion requested the retreat of both the Iron Hands and Death Guard, they did so out of caution for what the Lion might do should they decline, not willing to test themselves against the might of the Dark Angels. With the engine in his possession, the Lion ordered the destruction of Perditus and made a warp jump with his new prize. The fleet was then beset by demonic spawn, and in response, Lionel Johnson reinstituted the Librarian Corps back into his legion, something that was in direct violation with the Emperor's edict at the Council of Nicaea. Though the situation dire, there was argument offered against such a notion by those within his legion, namely from that of Chaplain Nemiel, the cousin of Zahariel. The Lion would kill Chaplain Nemiel for his outright defiance. Asmodeus, did your power destroy the enemy? The former librarian said nothing, but looked up at the Primarch and nodded. Is this true? Asked the Lion, stooping low to lay hand on the shoulder of Asmodeus. Were your powers capable of harming our attackers?
From the warp they came, and with the power of the warp they can be banished, said the librarian.
He stood as the Lion changed his grip and guided the legionary back to his feet. He met the Primarch's gaze for a moment, then looked away.
Brother Redemptor Nemiel is right, my liege. I have broken the oath I swore.
A grave crime, and one that I will be sure to prosecute properly when the current situation has been resolved, said the Lion. He looked at Nemiel. There are 2 other librarians aboard, Hasfiel and Alberian. Bring them here.
This is a mistake, my liege,
said Nemiel, shaking his head.
The abominations that attack us, these Nephilia, are a conjunction of sorceries. I swore an oath also to uphold the Edict of Nicaea. To unleash further sorcery will endanger us even more. Think again, my liege.
I have issued an order, Brother Redemptor, said the Lion, drawing himself to his full height.
One that I cannot follow,
said Nemiel, his tone hard, trembling with the effort of defying his Primarch. My authority is absolute, the Lion said, clenching his fist, his lips drawn back to reveal gleaming teeth.
The Edict of Nicaea was issued by the Emperor, my liege,
said Nemiel. There is no higher authority. Enough! The Lion's roar was so loud it caused Corswain's auto-sensors to dampen his hearing, as they would have if caught in a potentially deafening detonation. The Seneschal was not entirely sure what happened next. The Lion moved, and a split second later, a cracked skull-faced helm was spinning through the dull, glowing lights of the stratagem, cutting a bloody arc through the air. Nemiel's headless corpse clattered to the floor as the Lion held up his hand, pieces of ceramite embedded in the fingertips of his gore-splattered gauntlet. During this conflict with the demon hordes, a greater demon of Tzeentch, known as Kairos Fateweaver, appeared before the Lion, trying to convert him to the side of Chaos, though all attempts failed against the iron will of the Emperor's first son. With a roar, the Lion broke free from the net of lightning that surrounded him, still lancing his sword towards the Nephili's body. a hail of fire hammered into the creature as Corswain leapt away, the Seneschal's bolter spitting rounds. Predictable fool. The Nephilim's staff swept out, turning aside the lion's first blow. Twisting, wings furling, the creature sidestepped the lion's charge, its serpent head lashing out towards his neck with bared fangs. The lion turned mid-stride, dropping hope which had been deflected by the Nephilim's parry. His gauntleted fingers curled around the serpentine neck as the lion let himself fall to the ground. His grip unbreakable, the lion dragged the Nephilim down with him, its chest plunging onto the waiting point of despair. Harmed, but not slain, the Nephilim reared up, taking the sword from the Primarch's grip, wings spreading once more. Now bat-like and shimmering gold, its vulture's beak rammed into the side of the lion's helm as it sought to pull its other head free from his grasp. Wings beating fiercely, it tried to lift away, but the lion's grip held firm as he was pulled back to his feet. "Did you see this coming?" snarled the lion as he hammered his half-buried sword fully into the Nephilim. With the demon threat removed, the lion began his pursuit of Konrad Curze, using the Tuchulcha engine to ambush his former brother's fleet, resulting in another deadly confrontation between the two legions. With the lion's tactical advantage, the Night Lord's fleet was crushed, losing nearly 1/4 of its ships and leaving Curze wounded and fleeing before Johnson could finish him off. With some time to recover, Konrad would lead a failed assault on the Lion's flagship, the Invincible Reason, with his first captain, Sevatar, and the elite units of Atramenta Terminators being captured or killed, while Konrad himself fled once again, though this time he was trapped on board the Invincible Reason. The Lion would send hunter-killer teams to seek out Curze, but the Night Haunter would dispose of each and every one of them until eventually Johnson took up the hunt himself. For 16 solar weeks he would pursue his brother through the depths of his flagship with no success. Eventually, Captain Sevatar and the remaining Terminators would be able to escape their imprisonment, allowing them to join their legion in the eventual fight on Terra. During the Heresy, the traitor Primarch Lorgar of the Wordbearers would divide the galaxy by creating the Ruinstorm. This led to many of the Loyalist legions being separated and unable to come to the aid of Terra. Even with the use of the Tuchulcha engine, the Dark Angels found they were unable to make their way to Terra, though by fate or luck they managed to lock onto an alien beacon known as the Pharos, which would eventually lead them to the world of Macragge. There they would be welcomed by the Primarchs Rabute Guilliman and Sanguinius. Together, the three founded the Imperium Secundus, a proxy imperium while separated from Terra, and also to act as a safeguard should the Emperor fall. This triumvirate would see Sanguinius as the new Emperor of the Imperium, with Lionel Johnson taking on the role of Lord Protector and Supreme Commander over the new Imperium military might, essentially making Johnson the new War Master. It was Guilliman that conceptualized this new Imperium, however, wisely came to the conclusion that should he nominate himself as Emperor, it would look like he was taking advantage of the rebellion to claim power for himself. And so Sanguinius, with his obvious charisma and majesty, would be the most acceptable choice amongst the Loyalists. The Lion had no interest for pageantry, politics, and the world of government, and so made no argument at this suggestion, more content himself to lead the counter to the traitor legions. This event, however, was somewhat overshadowed when Konrad Curze managed to escape the Invincible Reason and wreak havoc across Macragge, causing as much chaos as he could manage as fast as possible. He was eventually caught by the Lion and Guilliman, who managed to corner him, resulting in a life-and-death fight that would put each of their skills to the test. The Lion rotated like a dancer and swung the famous Lion Sword sidelong at Curze with a two-handed grip. Curze ducked, evaded, and rotated in turn, punching away Guilliman's next strike as he did so. The Lion tilted and swung his sizzling blade in a strike designed to unseam Curze from the groin to the throat. But Curze was no longer there. He had flickered left and blocked the upswing. Then he smashed his hand into the Lion's face. Blood spurted from the strike. A talon had punctured clean through the side of the Lion's neck. The Lion reeled backwards, his hand clamped to the wound to staunch it. Some of his men mobbed forward in alarm. "No!" the Lion yelled. Guilliman slammed his ragged shield into Curze and drove him backwards. He stabbed twice with the gladius, rapidly like a striking snake, and drew blood on the second jab.
"Bastard!"
Curze hissed. His talons struck Guilliman and knocked him aside, leaving 4 long gouges in his chest plate. Guilliman recovered, sweeping in low with his blade and then high on the return. Struck, Curze spun away and fell. When he rose, his cheek was open to the bone. "Now we start in earnest," he hissed. "Now we finish in earnest," the lion spat, coming at Curze with his sword ready. Curze, however, had actually brought them into a trap, bringing down an entire chapel with explosives onto the 2 brothers. They survived, though, through direct intervention of an Iron Warrior loyalist, warsmith Barbaros d'Antioch, who pulled the Primarchs through a portal opened by the Pharos, which he had been using to communicate to Guilliman with. This would, however, once again lead to Konrad's Curze's escape. The Lion, having felt responsible for the incident in Macragge, spent the next few years pursuing Curze around the stars, obsessively trying to track down the Night Haunter. This 2-year hunt would bring him and his legion in conflict with traitor legions such as the Wordbearers, World Eaters, Alpha Legion, and Death Guard. Eventually this hunt would lead him back to Macragge, where the Lion would constantly bump heads with Guilliman over the security policies of Imperium Secundus, while also dealing with a rebellion the Lion believed Curze to have instigated upon the world. When a rebellion suicide bomber managed to hit an Astartes convoy, the Lion declared martial law with the use of his legion. After some negotiations of how to kill Curze, Sanguinius and Guilliman convinced the Lion not to cause civilian casualties by use of orbital bombardment on the region of Illyrium, instead deciding to go in with his Deathwing company as a compromise. Though, without his brother's knowledge, an orbital bombardment was ordered by the Lion regardless. When the Lion finally managed to catch his prey, they both fought fiercely until Curze was defeated and the Lion stood the victor. When Johnson asked Curze why he turned from their father, he replied, "Why not?" Curze told Lion that there was a monster inside his head, a monster he was unable to silence or stop, and Lionel Johnson once again showed mercy by sparing the life of his wayward brother. However, the Lion still knew how dangerous Curze was, and so tore from him his jetpack, lifted him high overhead and then brought him down hard over his knee, breaking his back and leaving him paralyzed. The Lion seized him in both hands, dragging him up and then drove him down, smashing the Night Haunter into the hard floor. Again, and twice more, the Lion beat Curze against the unyielding stone. Curze twisted like a hooked fish, one moment in the Lion's grip, the next arching away, turning in midair. The Lion lunged after him, snaring an ankle. He turned on his heel, swinging Curze by the leg, crashing him against a wall. The Lion spun back and released his hold, hurling the Night Haunter through a dozen scripted stools. Ancient wood turned into a cloud of dust and splinters. Curze got on all fours, but not quick enough to avoid the Lion's wrath. An armored boot hit the Night Haunter in the midriff and lifted him into the air. A second kick connected with his jaw, sending the Night Lord onto his back. The Lord of Caliban reached down and dragged Curze like a rag doll, threw him again, turning another 10 stools into kindling. Looming out of the splintered fog, the Lion smashed a knee into Curze's face as he tried to rise. The Night Haunter's arm hung limply as the Dark Angel picked him up again. With a grunt, he tore the power plant from Curze's armor, tossing the backpack aside with a hiss of broken coolant links and a shower of sparks. Throat in one hand, leg in the other, the Lion hoisted Curze above his head. The Knight of Caliban dropped to one knee, bringing his foe down across his shoulders. Armor split like bamboo and bones cracked, eliciting a shriek from the Night Haunter. With a contemptuous glare, the Lion tossed Curze to the ground. He flopped to his broken back. With the Night Haunter rendered immobile, he was brought before Sanguinius and Guilliman to stand trial before the 3 brothers. Curze would defend his actions, yet not admit guilt, claiming that with each of the Primarchs they were created to perform a specific function, and Curze was only ever doing as his nature dictated. He then sought to create a divide by revealing the Lion had ordered an orbital bombardment, which Johnson responded by attempting to kill him. Sanguinius quickly talked him down, while Guilliman, in outrage at the Lion acting against their wishes, grabbed Johnson's sword and snapped it over his knee. Fury took hold of the Lion, but he was dismissed by Sanguinius and exiled from Imperium Secundus along with his Dark Angels, and so they took their leave of Macrack. Back aboard the Invincible Reason, Lionel Johnson looked back on his past, the decisions he had made, the prices paid, how he banished his old friend Luther, and the slaying of Nemiel, thinking on his own nature and the regrets brought about by it. He then ordered that himself and one of his lieutenants be teleported back onto Macrack with the Tuchulcha engine. Just as Sanguinius was to deliver the death blow for Konrad's execution, the Lion and his lieutenant were teleported into the chamber and demanded his brother to hold his blade. He then explained how Curze's ability to see potential futures verified that the Emperor did indeed still live. For if Curze was to truly die at the hands of an assassin sent by the Emperor, then their father was very likely still alive to make that order. Sanguinius, who had his own precognitive visions of his death, heard the truth in what Johnson said and agreed to stay his hand. When asked what would become of Curze, the Lion took to his knee and promised that he would be the jailer of their fallen brother. The Invincible Reason would become the Night Haunter's prison, and, on occasion, the Lion would visit, if only to glean insight into his brother's visions, though this would rarely bear fruit. With the revelation that the Emperor was indeed alive, Imperium Secundus was immediately abolished, and the three brothers made plans to bypass the Ruinstorm and return to the aid of their father on Terra. During their attempts to navigate the Ruinstorm, they were set upon by demonic hordes hell-bent on destroying these possible rescuers of the Emperor. Frustration over the endeavour mounted. As the battles wore on, eventually Sanguinius received a vision that would lead them to Davin. Upon arriving at the world of Horus's fall, they were met with a vast demonic host defending the planet. Battle broke out between the two factions, and while the Lion and Guilliman believed they were there to simply destroy the planet via Exterminatus, Sanguinius surprised them when he boarded the Invincible Reason and took Konrad Curze down to the surface, hoping to use his prophetic abilities to figure out how they could save the Emperor. This surely enough enraged the Lion, who almost ordered they carry out the Exterminatus even though Sanguinius and his legion fought heroically on the planet's surface. Shocked by his own blind rage and insistence, the Lion called off the order, and soon realized that some external forces were trying to influence their actions into damnation. Johnson and Guilliman quickly descended to the planet's surface to aid their brother, who had become trapped in the war portal at the Temple of the Serpent Lodge. As the battle continued to rage, Sanguinius fought the demon Medeal within the Warp Gate, while Lionel Johnson and Rabute Guilliman worked together to bring down a Soulgrinder demon engine, in what may be seen as their first time fighting together as true brothers. Eventually, Sanguinius was able to escape the Warp Gate, and with his brothers they retreated from the surface of Davin, unleashing a storm of cyclonic torpedoes onto the world, destroying it. With the anchor to real space now gone, the demonic fleet was pulled back into the Immaterium. Due to this, a path through the Ruinstorm leading directly to Terra became available. However, Horus had clearly anticipated this and blocked the way to Terra with a multitude of fleets. The Lion and Guilliman used their own fleets as a distraction, while Sanguinius followed his own prophetic vision and made straight for Terra. The Lion thought for a moment, then said, "We can also draw some of their strength away." "How so?" "By applying the lesson I have learned at Episomos and Davin. Your fleet is the largest. I will attack their bastions, Rabute. I will destroy their homeworlds. That is the judgment that awaits them. Let it come now. Burn the corrupted planets. How many of our treacherous brothers will stay with the blockade their worlds are directly threatened? Not all of them." "Very well," said Guilliman. "It makes sense for my legion to be the battering ram against the blockades." He turned to Sanguinius. "We will open the way for you." He sighed. "I never thought if Terra still stood, that I would not be at Father's side in the struggle. Perhaps this is my expiation." The pain in his eyes was hard to look at. The Lion was expressionless. Sanguinius wondered if he might not be finding some real satisfaction in his path, in being the hand of judgment. The three Primarchs stood in silence for a moment. The paths were set. The moment of the Triumvirate's dissolution had truly arrived. They would fight for the common cause, but separately now. "When shall we three meet again?" the angel said. But he had told his brothers what awaited him on the Vengeful Spirit. and they did not answer. The Lion would focus his efforts on attacking traitor worlds, in the hopes of drawing as much of the traitor's forces away from the Siege of Terror, and with great pride was able to destroy the homeworlds of the Emperor's Children and the Death Guard, Chemos and Barbarous respectively. His crusade of vengeance would bring him to the homeworld of the Raven Guard, Deliverance, where Corvus Corax and Leman Russ were consolidating their own forces. Russ would join the Lion in his crusade against the traitor worlds, while Corax, with his shattered legion, would only commit a small portion of his sons to the cause, believing he could be of more use in the fight on Terror, while also hoping to seek answers from his father. The Lion would eventually lead the Dark Angels to Terror, but would find he was too late. The Emperor had almost been killed by Horus, and was now bound to the Golden Throne, barely hanging onto life. Learning of his failure to protect his father, Lionel Johnson returned to his homeworld of Caliban, once again haunted by his choices, his failures, and the consequences of his actions. Upon his fleet arriving over the planet, they were immediately brought under fire from Caliban's defences. The Lion then learned that Luther had fallen to the powers of chaos. Filled with grief and fury towards his old friend and mentor, he ordered orbital bombardment of his home world, wishing to put an end to chaos once and for all. With Caliban crumbling under the apocalyptic assault of the Lion's fleet, he made his way to the Order's Fortress Monastery, where he would meet his old friend. The battle between the two old friends was enough to shake the very foundations of the Order's Fortress Monastery. Luther's jealousy of his former student had led him down the path of chaos, receiving gifts from the Chaos Gods, and in doing so, had brought him to the level of a Primarch. The battle raged on as the planet around them broke under the devastation of the bombardment. So lost in their personal feud, they could not see their home nearing its end. Luther would unleash a monstrous psychic attack on Johnson, mortally wounding him, and with the dying son of the Emperor before him, he came to his senses. His jealousy had allowed him to be manipulated by the ruinous powers, turning on his home, his people, and his friend. The will to fight drained from Luther, as he collapsed to his knees and watched his oldest friend die before him. With chaos once again losing one of its pawns, a warp storm opened up over the surface of the planet, pulling the remainder of the traitor Dark Angels into its belly and spitting them out across space and time. They would be known as the Fallen, and forever hunted by their loyalist brothers. All that remained of Caliban was at best described as an asteroid field. However, due to the Order's Fortress Monastery protective force fields, it had survived the destruction of its once proud homeworld and now hung suspended amongst the grave of the lost planet. When the Dark Angels entered the fortress, they found only a broken Luther, who claimed that the Lion had been taken by the Watchers in the Dark and would one day return during the Imperium's greatest need, and to forgive his old friend for his mistakes. Luther was kept in stasis within the depths of the fortress, now known as the Rock, to forever reflect on his selfishness and treachery. This was a secret kept over the thousands of years by the Supreme Grand Master of the Dark Angels, passed on only to those who would succeed him. More than 10,000 years later, Lionel Johnson would awaken from his slumber. His memory eluded him. He found himself in a realm known as Mirror Caliban, the home to both the Watchers in the Dark and the great beast he had once hunted in his youth. A being known as the Old King also lived in this mysterious realm, and though the Old King is said to wish to speak, he can only sit by and bleed from his grievous wounds. The Lion was informed by the Watchers in the Dark that if the King were to be asked the right questions, he would answer, and could be found either fishing on the river in a boat or sitting within his castle. He was then warned of the shadow that stirred around the Old King, and to avoid drawing its attention. Moving on, the Lion found a domed building, of which the Watchers in the Dark issued another warning, that Johnson was not ready to enter this structure safely. Frustrated by the seemingly lack of information and direction he was getting from the Watcher, he then asked what he should do, only for the Watcher to respond with, "Follow your nature." The Lion then did what he knew best. Following the scent of corruption through the mirror fortress of Caliban, he eventually found himself surrounded by the world of Kamath, where he came across some survivors of the conquered world. These survivors were in constant defense against both the remaining 10,000 Eyes warband that had stayed behind to hunt them for sport, as well as the corrupted wildlife spawned from the planet. When the Lion saved the survivors from the beasts that attacked them, they brought him to their camp, where a fallen Dark Angel named Zabriel had been hiding, while also helping the camp with protection. Upon seeing his Primarch return in the flesh, he believed his time had come, and he was to be killed for his betrayal. Zabriel, however, would not go without a fight. The Space Marine opens fire and bolt shells roar through the air, but they do not strike their target. This is not because the Space Marine's aim is inaccurate as such. He expertly placed his shots where he saw the hunter. It is just that in the microseconds between the Space Marine's hand starting to twitch and his transhuman reflexes bringing his weapon up, the hunter has already moved. The hunter dives to his right because there are people immediately to his left, and although he could avoid them, he does not wish to draw the Space Marine shots towards them. They are not as fast, as resilient, or as well armoured as he is, and even being winged by a bolt shell could be fatal. His hands touch down first as he finishes his leap some 20 feet away, cushioning his impact and distributing his weight. He pivots slightly on his left hand to bring his legs around. They are in contact with the ground for a mere moment before he pushes off again. The hunter leaves the ground in another stunning fast bound. Lionel Johnson, Primarch of the 1st Legion, collides with the Space Marine and bears him to the ground. The Space Marine tries to bring his weapons up, but the Lion casually slaps them out of his hands. Thoughts are still sleeting through his forebrain, but enough have found home for him to remember who he is and what has happened to him. Caliban, the Order, his father, and his brothers. Horus, that wretched traitor. Curze, the thrice-damned monster. Noble, tragic Sanguinius, and brash, swaggering Russ. And the infuriating Rabute, watching his traitorous brother's home planets burn at his orders. Watching Terra burn because he was too late. Returning to Caliban and watching it burn around him. Facing Luthor and the tidal wave of grief that struck him when he realized what his friend had become. A tidal wave which strikes him once more and nearly bears him under. And then, nothing. Just the forest and the river. The Lion pins the Space Marine down before he can reach for the combat knife or the chainsword at his belt. He glances down at the black armor, battered and worn and still carrying signs that would mean nothing to those outside the Legion, but which to the Lion are as clear as the faces of the people around him. Knight of the 2nd Destroyer Squad in 3rd Company, 15th Chapter, Daikon of the Order of the 3 Keys, an initiate of the Dreadwing. More memories rise to the surface, furnishing him with a name that belongs to those ranks. Zabriel. His memory returned to him. The Primarch now held Zabriel's life in his hands. Before he could act, the people of the camp begged Zabriel be spared as he had been protecting them from the horrors of the world. Both would accuse the other of treachery, of turning on the Imperium and the Emperor, which came as a shock to the Lion, though after some reflection, Zabriel's words hit home. Both explaining themselves, they came to an understanding, and the Lion would ask Zabriel to swear his loyalty once again. Agreeing, he swears it, only to ask the Lion to do the same. Much to Johnson's annoyance, he swears the same oath back to Zabriel, silently acknowledging the old Astartes' wisdom. Together, they would use this new ability the Lion had learned, known as the Forest Wall, and seek out more Fallen, recruiting them into the new loyalist Dark Angel faction of the Risen. They would do battle with traitor forces across the expanse of Imperium Nihilis, recruiting more Fallen as they went. The Lion would be captured by a fallen sorcerer named Seraphax, who intended to remove Johnson's soul and use his body as a puppet in order to gain audience with and then kill the Emperor. Believing that once the Emperor was dead, his soul could escape and his body would finally ascend to that of a warp god, putting an end to chaos and Xeno races once and for all. The recently formed Risen would come to their Primarch's aid, and upon seeing Seraphax transform into a demon of the warp, Balor, a follower of Seraphax, would see his mistake and thrust his warblade through his master's back, saving the Lion. The Lion offered Balor a place amongst his fallen. However, the warblade of which Seraphax had given to him was slowly killing him, and so the newly redeemed Dark Angel asked instead for a quick and noble death, of which the Lion obliged. The Lion would spend more time exploring the mysterious mirror Caliban, mastering the Forest Walk ability, and later coming across the power sword Fealty. Fealty in hand, he would once again approach the domed building, encountering a shape-shifting demon that took on the forms of his brothers, attempting to break the Lion's will. With each false brother he defeated, the Lion would lose a little ground, until eventually he would notice the Emperor's shield. The light he saw from outside flares up again from the wall behind him. He turns, and he sees it emanating from a kite shield which hangs there. It is richly decorated, and embossed with an icon of an eagle crowned with laurels. The Lion reaches for it, and as his fingers touch it, fire, fury, he stands on a battlefield with a shield on his arm under a dark sky. But he can see all the stars, and he knows their names, and he can feel everything around him. All the humans hurting and bleeding and dying. All the Xenos, those abominations. And all the tiny creatures burrowing through the soil and the trees and the grass and the wind. He can feel it all. It is all connected, a web of power. And this is not overwhelming. This is just how he lives, instant to instant to instant. The Lion staggers. The shield is on his arm. He knows the touch of that mind. He has felt it before. Father. Claiming it for his own, he would use it to slay the demon, with the visage of Konrad Curze shriveling into nothingness like a memory long since forgotten. Lionel Johnson buried the past along with it. Shortly after, the Lion would meet with Dante, the chapter master of the Blood Angels, who had been investigating the rumours the Dark Angel's Primarch's return. Alongside of informing the Lion on the current state of the Imperium, he also shocked him by revealing that Rabute Guilliman was alive. The Lion would later come to the aid of Dante, who had been locked in a titanic battle with the Demon Prince Angron, Johnson's former brother. Dante and the Blood Angels, alongside the Unforgiven, had been doing battle with the traitors of the Black Legion and the World Eaters. With most of his Sanguinian guard dead, and Dante himself bracing for Angron's killing blow, Lionel Johnson stepped out from the Forest Walk and without hesitation engaged his fallen brother. The fight that ensued would spread across the surface of the war-torn demon world of Wormwood. The two demigods fought their way across a mechanical plateau where piston columns pounded mechanically and jets of white-hot flame erupted from hidden apertures. Angron sought to lop El Johnson's head from his shoulders, but Fealty was there to block the blow. Samniarius rebounded again from the Emperor's shield, and as the shockwave drove Angron back, the Lion seized the chance to duck around a pummeling row of pistons and gain some space. Angron dropped his head and bored straight through the slabs of machinery. He bellowed as he wrenched aside sparking mechanisms and hacked apart steel-braided sinew, only to recoil as the Lion smashed the Emperor's shield into his face. El Johnson retreated again, a strategy cohering in his mind as he clattered down a spiraling brass stairway. He was gaining a sense of his foe. Angron was a devastatingly powerful and unrelenting enemy, but the Lion thought he knew how he might defeat his former brother. His train of thought was disrupted as the stairway gave a violent lurch. Looking up, El Johnson saw Angron had taken to the air, letting his weapons dangle from their chain manacles as he grasped the stairway's superstructure, then wrenched the entire edifice away from the side of the mechanical plateau. With an oath, the Lion leapt clear of the spiral stair, buckling under its own weight, and collapsed. He dropped, cloak rippling behind him, and landed atop a roof of Gothic ruin. Despite the tumorous masses of biotechnology that grew from it, El Johnson felt a horrible sense of familiarity as he glanced around the crumbling rooftop and saw the hooded statues that dotted it. He did not know precisely what this structure had been, but he recognized the architectural style of Caliban before Imperial compliance. Angron could scent the Lion's potent biology and the lapping powders of his armor. He could hear the Primarch's heartbeat, his footfalls, the servo whine of his battle plate. He glimpsed the furnace-like beacon of El Johnson's soul burning in his warp sight, yet the phantasmic smoke occluded even Angron's demonic senses. The Lion, for his part, had less trouble keeping track of a foe that roared and snarled oaths and imprecations with every heaving breath. Angron hacked at half-imagined geists and bellowed with rage. In response, the Lion surged suddenly from the flank and struck with the Emperor's shield, sending Angron recoiling into the air with wings beating. The demon Primarch lunged, but Johnson was gone again into the fumes. Angron thundered after his prey. Again the lion evaded, struck, and faded back from his enemy's lightning-fast counterattack. In his mind, he fought monsters again in the mist-wreathed Calibanite forests. The few times Angron landed a blow, the Emperor's shield was always there to block it and send the Primarch reeling back. All the while, Angron's rage mounted until it danced across his body as a spectral flame. His muscles and eyes bulged as though he might literally burst from the anger swelling within. Then came a piston, rushing up from the depths and discharging steam as it slammed to a halt at his apogee. For a moment, it blasted aside the veil of smog. The lion was revealed in the act of slipping around Angron's flank for yet another goading strike. There was no thought, only the primal urge to kill, as Angron beat his wings and hurled himself at the lion like a living avalanche. He swung his weapons in wide arcs as he came, aiming to scissor them through Johnson's neck in a move no shield could possibly block. Yet this time, the lion made no effort to defend. With blistering speed, he instead dropped to one knee, braced his blade with his whole body, and let Angron slam straight into its raised point. The demon Primarch's own impetus drove the glowing blade up through his torso until it erupted from the nape of his neck in a fountain of gore. The lion would use Angron's own attack to force fealty into the throat of the demon prince, and then proceed to finish him off with the Emperor's shield, casting him back into the warp. With Angron defeated, the united efforts of the Dark Angels and Blood Angels were able to evacuate the planet before it vanished into the warp. The lion would be given the title of Knight of Nihilus, Protector of Imperium Nihilus.
Since that fateful day, the lion has stalked the many worlds of Imperium Nihilus, hunting down terrible monsters and vile heretics. On planet after planet, word has spread of the Knight of Nihilus, and people pray that he will come to save them from Xenos hordes and heretic invaders. Wherever he stalks, it is well within the lion's power to conceal his presence. And so though he may be invisible, all over the Imperium Nihilus armies fight with a greater vigor in the belief that he might be watching them and aiding them.
Thank you very much everyone for watching this video. Please like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment on your favourite lion moment in the comment section down below. Also, sharing this video helps feed that algorithm, so
let's feed the algorithm gods.
There is also a Patreon link down below if you would like to support the channel for just £1 a month. I've really enjoyed making an attempt at much longer form videos, as they are personally what I like to listen to as I paint, game, or am on a long road trip for work. So, hopefully this can provide the same type of entertainment I myself enjoy. I have a few other ideas I'm going to be working on, and maybe eventually I'll be able to hit that goal of one video per week. Thank you very much again for your time, my friends, and ta for now.